Hello everyone, welcome to the Learner's Den. Today we would start with the topic literary devices, which is also known as poetic devices or parts of speech. To define literary devices, we can say that these devices are specific techniques or tools which are used by poets for various purposes. The various purposes may include painting a picture in our mind, to create the mood of the poem, to convey a deeper meaning, to make it more interesting for the readers, to help the readers see or perceive things in a different light, to connect to the reader, to create a rhythm so as to enjoy the poem, and to bring out the essence of the poem. We start with the first literary device, that is onomatopoeia. It is not as difficult as it sounds. In fact, it's a very easy one. Now, when we read all kinds of comics, we see that there are some words which are used in these comics which actually do not make any sense, or they are not real words. In fact, they just talk about the sounds that the writer wants the reader to perceive in their mind. For example, poof will be used to signify something which is vanishing. Bang or kaboom would indicate an explosion. Vroom would indicate speed. So these are not exactly words, but these are just sound words or words that represent sound. So if you see any kind of words which are just representing sounds in the poem, then you have to understand that it is onomatopoeia. Moving on, next we have rhyme scheme. Now, rhyme scheme is something which is very easy to detect. In a poem, we actually pay attention to the last word or the last sound of the poem, and we see that last sound matches to which sound next. So in this example, we see cats matches with bats, boots with cute. Hence, if we assign an alphabet to these sounds, then we can come up with the rhyme scheme. Similarly, in the second example, we see star matching with R and high matching with sky. So here in the first example, we see the rhyme scheme to be ABAB, and in the second example, it is AABB. So as to define rhyme scheme, we can say it is a pattern of rhyming words at the end of each line of a poem. And that would give us the rhyme scheme. Moving on, we have imagery. Even the word imagery makes it sound like imagination. So yes, imagery are anything which helps to appeal to the senses of the readers. They might appeal to our auditory sense when it talks about music, noise, or even silence. It can appeal to our tactile sense, that is the sense of touch, sometimes even to the sense of taste or smell or visual. So if we see any description which appeals to our senses, then it could be imagery. So the language used to appeal to the senses of the readers can be defined as imagery. Moving on, we have alliteration. For alliteration, we first need to know about vowels, which are A, E, I, O, U, and consonants. Consonants are all the alphabets which are not vowels. If we look at this example, we see how the sound B in the first example, blueberry bacon bit, the sound B is repeated. Second, we see the consonant C repeated in chocolate carrot chips, then P repeated in peppermint pizza pinwheel. So as to define alliteration, if we are using the same consonant sound as the beginning of the word in a line or a phrase, then it is alliteration. But you will have to pay attention that the sound is a consonant sound and not a vowel sound. Moving on, we have simile. Simile is very easy. In our life, we use words or phrases like cute as kitten, cold as ice, blind as a bat. So if we compare two objects with using the words like or as, then they will fall in the category of simile. So it is only comparison between two things using the words like or as. Like or as is very, very important to be able to recognize a simile. Talking about metaphor, in some examples we see where the comparison is very direct. One thing is not compared that it is like the other thing, but it is said to be the other thing. Like the sun was a gleaming pearl. The sun was not shining like a gleaming pearl. The sun is directly uh, said to be a gleaming pearl. In examples like this, we see that it is a metaphor where comparison is made, one thing is said to be another without the use of like or as. To understand it better, let's look at the difference between the two. Simile will always use like or as in the sentence. Metaphor will not use like or as. Instead, it will use is or was, are or were. And that is something which we have to keep in mind to be able to identify similes and metaphors and to be able to differentiate between the two. Moving on, next we have hyperbole. Hyperbole is nothing but exaggeration. When we say 1,000 things to do, it does not actually mean you have literally you have to do 1,000 things. Or if you sometimes you say you are so tired that you would like to sleep for a year, you know it is not possible, but we like to exaggerate things just to try and highlight it more, to focus on the condition more. Sometimes you might say you're so hungry you could just eat the other person in front, and someone cried so much that they created a lake. Only the thing to focus here is that if the statement is exaggerated or it makes claims which are pretty unrealistic, then it is a hyperbole. So if we are talking about exaggerated statements, we know that it is a hyperbole. Next, we talk about symbolism. Symbolism mainly talks about an object or a thing or an animal which represents something else. For example, a red rose or a cupid will always represent love. It stands to symbolize love. Then dove is a symbol for peace. Then we have grave to try show death. So if we have even with the colors like white for purity, black for evil, then if you even look at the emojis that you have in your cell phone, you will see that to show that someone is ill or sick, the color green is used for that emoji instead of yellow. So that is symbolism, where a symbol is something that stands or represents something else. And it is a universal knowledge that people understand that what a particular thing stands for. Next, we have personification. Personification comes from the word person. We come across quotes like mountains are calling. Of course, mountains cannot call because that is a human quality. Then the leaves danced on the wind. The leaves cannot dance. It is a non-living entity. But we are giving a human quality to a non-living entity. Sometimes it can even be used in a negative sense that the sky turned dreary and as the gloom clouds enveloped it. Even these words are merely human qualities. But when we allot these human qualities to animals or objects, then we can say that it is a personification. Next, we have parenthesis. In some of the poems, or in some places, like for class 10th, you have the poem Amanda. You will see that after a certain stanza, there is the next stanza is in brackets. Here, the lines or the stanza which is in brackets, it actually means that the character is not speaking it aloud, rather, it is thinking in his mind. But the poet or the writer wants the readers to know what is going in the mind of a certain character. So, so as to give you an extra information. But the character does not speak out loud, and the other characters involved in the same story or poem or play does not get a hint of what the character is thinking, but the readers or the audience do get to understand about the same. This technique of using brackets to give the reader some extra information or afterthought is called parenthesis. And usually, round brackets are used to express that thought or provide the additional information. That is parenthesis. Moving on, we have enjambment. Enjambment is also pretty simple. Where you look at poems, you see that one line is incomplete and it is followed in the next line. Again, without a punctuation, it goes to the next line. And after a few lines, when the poet has been able to completely express his thought, then only there is a punctuation. So when there is a lack of punctuation at the end of a certain line in the poem, and the punctuation only arrives at the end of the stanza, then that process is called enjambment. So enjambment, to define, is the running lines of poetry from one line to another without any sort of punctuation indicating a stop. So wherever you see a lack of punctuation and the lines going from one to the other with a continuous thought, then that process is enjambment. Next, we have repetition. Repetition is simply repeating or saying the same thing or same word, same line again and again and again. The only use of repetition is to highlight a particular idea. So when the same idea, phrase, word is repeated again and again in the poem to highlight or focus on that particular idea, then that is called repetition. Very close to repetition is our next category, which is anaphora. Anaphora is very similar to the last one that we did, that is repetition, with a slight difference. In anaphora, the repetition happens only with the first part of the line. So if the first part of a certain line or a phrase is repeated in the lines below it or in the lines following it, then only it falls in the category of anaphora. In the first, you see life is repeated. In the second example, we can see why is repeated. So where a deliberate repetition of the first part of the sentence is done to create an artistic effect, then that process is called an anaphora. I hope you have understood the difference between repetition and anaphora. Repetition could be anywhere in the poem. It could be a word, a line, a phrase. And anaphora is mostly the first part of the sentence or a phrase which is repeated in the following lines. So that difference we need to keep in mind to be able to differentiate between anaphora and repetition. Next, we have transferred epithet. Now, this could be explained with an example. First example says, he stood upon the dizzy cliff. Now, if you look closely into this example, you will realize that the word dizzy cannot be associated with cliff Rather, it was the person who stood on the cliff felt dizzy. So the word dizzy should be associated with the subject he, which has been transferred from there to the noun cliff. So if a transfer of an adjective or an adverb is done in a line from one noun to another, that process is a transferred epithet. Let's look at another example. He passed a sleepless night. A night can never be sleepless. A night is always associated, a sleepless night, the word sleepless is always associated with a person. But in the same line, the word sleepless is transferred from the subject he to night. So when this transfer takes place from one noun to another, again, this is a transferred epithet. Another example to give better clarity, I had a fun day. Even in this example, a day cannot be fun on its own until and unless you have fun in that day. So fun basically belongs to the subject I, which has been transferred to day. So when there is a transfer of adjective from one noun to another, then the process is a transferred epithet. It is different from personification or anything else because here the adjective is transferred from one noun to another, and only with the transfer of that adjective the sentence will make sense. So we have to understand if the adjective is transferred and if with the transfer of the adjective the sentence makes more sense to us. Next we have oxymoron. Oxymoron could be defined with just this picture where there is a snowman which is on fire. These are two absolutely opposite ideas which are used in this picture together. More examples of oxymoron which we use in our daily life include silent scream, sometimes old news, or when we say love is bittersweet, bitter and sweet being two opposite ideas. Then they are planning on a civil war. A war cannot be civil, and if it is civil, it is not a war. Then we can get some plastic silverware. If it is plastic, it cannot be silver. If it is silver, it cannot be plastic. So when we use two opposite ideas together, that combination is called an oxymoron. And last, we have poetic license. Now, if you write things like this, look at the last line of the example that is presented now, which talks about a Realio Trulio daggers on his toes. Realio Trulio is no word as such, but the poet has used or modified these words just to make it more fun or just to create an artistic effect in the poem. Similarly, if you see the next example, the last word is for there was a pirate climbing in the winda. If you look at the spelling of winda, it is W-I-N-D-A. There is no word or there is no meaning to the word W-I-N-D-A, winda. This modification of the spelling or this incorrect spelling is done to rhyme it with Belinda. And this is only possible because the poets have the freedom to ignore the standard rules of grammar or spellings to create the desired effect that they want. But this license is only and only given to the poet. So if you are planning to modify your words or to play with the rules of standard grammar, then you might not get enough marks because, well, you do not have that license. The license is only given to the poets to be able to create the desired effect. I hope you have understood this. If you want to check your understanding, use the link which is given in the description to check your understanding and see if you have followed everything that was there in this video. Also, few of the lines may have more than one answer. Please like, share and subscribe and wish you all a happy learning. Bye-bye.